Well, very good evening to you. Thank you for making time for us right here on K24 Evening Edition. Now, today also marked yet another day that President William Ruto named another batch of cabinet secretary nominees. But an interesting bit about that particular pronouncement was the fact that part of those team members were made up of leaders from the opposition, leaders who had in the past constantly reiterated the fact that they wanted nothing to do with President William Ruto's government. Many Kenyans, of course, expected them to actually reject this, but fast forward to a couple of hours after the president naming those nominees, they went ahead on the social media platforms and actually thanked the president for giving them the opportunity to serve if approved by the National Assembly. Also today, as the media fraternity, journalists took to the streets to fight for their rights and call for the stop to police brutality that has been meted upon journalists. We have these stories and much more lined up for you on tonight's bulletin, but first things first, we begin by having a look at what is shipping news tonight.
I've now forwarded the name of John Mbadi Ngongo to the Ministry of National Treasury and Economic Planning.
Raila men lead President William Ruto's final batch of cabinet secretary nominees as the reality of another coalition government dawns on Kenyans.
I don't even dream of engaging with them. Ati huyu akitaka aje ongee sio na mimi niongee na Ruto nini?
For the nation's good or greed, ODM lieutenants joined Ruto's government that they had vowed never to be part of, having termed it as the worst thing that happened to Kenyans.
And violations by police officers must be handled expeditiously through due process with a view to giving Kenyans a police service that upholds the highest standards of integrity.
And President William Ruto promises government support to families of those who lost their lives in the recent protest in his latest move to win the trust of the youth.
Pena ujumbe kwa wanaotazama, kwa mtazamaji, makosa gani ambao tumefanya.
Sisi ndo the messenger, hakuna haja ya kuattack the messenger. Tunachoomba tu ni tushirikishwe tu.
Plus, journalists across the country protest against police brutality towards members of the press during their coverage of the anti-government protests. Well, K24 Evening Edition begins right now. I'm Alan Owino. Our sign language interpreter for this session is Clement Mole. Now, we kick off tonight's bulletin by having a list and a look at that particular list that has now been officially named by the president, of course, taking into consideration that we still have one or two dockets that haven't necessarily been filled, and that is the Ministry of EAC, Arid Lands, and also the position of their Attorney General. Let's have a look at this list. Now, these are the new fresh list of cabinet nominees. At the top of that list is Professor Kithure Kindiki, who comes in as a nominee for the Ministry of Interior and Administration of National Government, as well as Soipan Tuya, who has now been moved to the Ministry of Defense. We also have Alice Wahome, who's been nominated to serve in the Lands and Housing and Public Works. We have Dr. Julius Ogamba, who's been nominated to serve in the Ministry of Education, as well as Aden Duale, who's been nominated to serve in the Ministry of Environment. Moving on with that list, we have a new face, that is Dr. Andrew Karanja, will be serving in the Ministry of Agriculture, of course, if approved by the National Assembly. We have Dr. Deborah Mulongo Barasa, who's been nominated to take over from Susan Nakumichi in the Ministry of Health, as well as Eric Muridi, who's now will be serving in the Ministry of Water and Sanitation. We have Davis Chirchir, not a new face in this cabinet. He's been nominated to serve in the Ministry of Roads and Transport, as well as Dr. Margaret Ndungu, who's been nominated to serve in the Ministry of Information Technology and Digital Economy. Moving forward, we have a new face right here. Honorable John Mbadi has been nominated to take over the National Treasury, as well as Salim Mvurya, not a new face, who's now been nominated to take over the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, as well as Rebecca Miano, who will now be taking over the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, as well as Honorable Opio Wandai, making a fresh entrance into this team, who will be serving in the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum, and Kipchumba Murkomen, not a new face. He'll now be serving in the docket of Youth Affairs, Creative Economy and Sports. Well, as we move on with that list, we have Hassan Ali Joho, of course, the former governor of Mombasa, coming in as a nominee for the Ministry of Mining, Blue Economy and Maritime Affairs. We have Dr. Alfred Mutua, who's been nominated to take over the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. We have Wycliffe Oparanya, who's been nominated to take over the Cooperatives and MSME Development Ministry, as well as Justin Muturi, who comes in as the former AG. He's been nominated to take over the Public Service and Human Capital Development Ministry. We have a fresh face, that is Stella Soy Langat, who's been nominated to take over the Ministry of Gender, Culture, Arts and Heritage. And, of course, not a new entrance, that is Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi, still maintaining his docket right there. And we now move on with this list of those who have been fired but were not retained in this new team that was named by the President. Moses Kuria previously served in the Ministry of Public Service, Performance and Delivery and Management. We have Eli Dowalo, who was the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Information, Technology and Digital Economy. Susan Nakumicha, formerly serving in the Ministry of Health, as well as Ezekiel Machogu, who served in the Ministry of Education. These are the fired CSS who did not necessarily make their way back to this fresh batch that was named by President William Ruto, something as opposed to some of their colleagues. Penina Malonza previously served in the Ministry of ESC and Arid Lands. She has made a comeback. Ababu Namwamba, previously serving in the Ministry of Youth Affairs, Creative Economy and Sports, as well as Simon Cheligui, previously serving in the Ministry of MSMEs, that has been replaced by former Governor Wycliffe Oparanya. And of course, we have Njuguna Ndungu, who was handling the docket of Ministry of National Treasury and Economic Planning, a ministry that, if he's approved, he'll now be taking over, and that is Honorable John Mbadi. As we move on with this list, we now move on to the list of CSS who've been retained. Kipchumba Murkomen was previously in the Ministry of Transport and Roads. He's now been nominated to take over from Ababu Namwamba in the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. We have Soipan Tuyo, previously serving in the docket that Honorable Duale will be taking over. That is the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. She's been nominated to take over the Ministry of Defense, basically switching positions with Honorable Aden Duale. We have Professor Kindiki Kithure maintaining the very same docket that he got fired from, that is the Ministry of Interior and National Administration, as well as Aden Duale, who now will be taking over the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. Davis Chirchir also makes the list of retained CSS, previously serving in the Ministry of Energy, now will be moved to the Ministry of Transport and Roads. We have Salim Mvuria, previously serving in the Ministry of Mining. He's now been nominated to take over the Ministry of Labor. Moving on, we have Rebecca Miano, who was previously serving as the Cabinet Secretary in the Ministry of Trade, will now be taking over a docket that was held by, that is Alfred Mutua, that is Ministry of Tourism and Foreign Affairs, which was briefly moved to the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, but that docket, I believe, has been reverted back to the Ministry of Tourism. Moving on, Alice Wahome retains the very same docket that she was fired from, that is the Ministry of Lands. She's the nominee for that. And of course, Justin Muturi, previously serving as the immediate former Attorney General, will now be moving to the Ministry of Public Service. Hassan. And we move on with the list, and these are the proposed ODM nominees. Fresh faces making an entry into this particular team. Hassan Ali Joho taking over mining, blue economy and maritime affairs. Wycliffe Oparanya, cooperatives and MSME development. John Mbadi taking over the coveted national treasury. And Opio Wandai being nominated to take over energy and petroleum. These are the faces from ODM and by extension Azimio coalition who have all accepted that particular call that was made by the president. Now, let's get on with some updates. President William Ruto has finally unveiled his final list of CS nominees after naming an additional 10 members to his new cabinet. In the final 10, Ruto has included senior ODM officials among 5 other nominees from his previous cabinet. Ian Ketan brings us the latest on how Ruto or official Ruto-Raila coalition government is poised to look like.
4 days after naming as a first 11 batch for cabinet slots, President William Ruto has today nominated another batch of 10 CSs for vetting in a bold move that includes 4 senior ODM lieutenants. Ruto, in what looks like an alliance with ODM Supremo Raila Odinga, nominated 2 ODM deputy party leaders Hassan Ali Joho and Wycliffe Oparanya, ODM chairperson John Mbadi, and the leader of the minority party in the National Assembly, James Opio Wandai. 2 weeks after President William Ruto was seen with Azimio leader Raila Odinga during the signing of the IEBC bill into law, speculation was rife on a possible deal between the duo. However, after today's final list of nominations, the speculations have been put to rest, with ODM now seen as being in coalition with the Kenya Kwanza government, pending the approval of the nominees by the National Assembly. ODM chairperson John Mbadi has been nominated into the Finance and National Planning docket, with his nomination raising eyebrows. Mbadi has an economic background and is currently serving as the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee. In the run-up to the general elections, Mbadi left tongues wagging after dropping out of the race to be ODM's gubernatorial flag bearer in Homa Bay County, thereby opting to support Gladys Wanga. With the Ruto-Raila partnership raising questions, Odinga's close allies including Siaya Governor James Orengo opposing any deal, Mbadi outrightly told off the former senator his sentiments, bringing about speculations that his name was up for nomination, speculations that were confirmed Wednesday afternoon.
We cannot kill our people, and the time when we are mourning them, we are looking for officers. That cannot happen. We must first deal with injustice. When we say Ruto must go with all his people. The entire government must go. Nobody is going to remain there.
Mbadi was vocal in opposing the dismissed Ruto cabinet during their vetting in 2022, insisting that 60% of them were not fit to serve the people of Kenya. Odinga's other close allies, Ali Hassan Joho, the former governor of Mombasa County, and his Kakamega counterpart, Wycliffe Oparanya, have both ripped big from the ODM Kenya Kwanza deal after they were nominated into the mining and blue economy and cooperatives dockets, respectively. The duo had served as minister and assistant minister in the Kibaki cabinet and was set to be appointed as CSs in the event Raila Odinga would have clinched the presidency. James Opio Wandai, who a few weeks ago castigated Ruto over the Finance Bill 2024, just a month after he came under fire for accompanying President Ruto in his official tour to the United States, has been nominated into the energy docket. If approved, his appointment will mean the people of Ugunja will have to go to the ballot to pick his successor. The appointment of the 4 has raised concerns within the opposition coalition, a day after ODM issued a statement denying allegations that they were having negotiations with President Ruto's Kenya Kwanza. Apart from the 4, President Ruto has renominated 5 other members who served in the previous cabinet, including Kipchumba Murkomen, who has been nominated into the sports docket, Alfred Mutua, the nominee for Labour, Rebecca Miano, the nominee for Tourism, Justin Muturi, nominee for Public Service and Human Capital, and Salim Mvurya, the nominee for Trade and Investment. The 9 will be vetted alongside Stella Soy Langat, who has been nominated to serve in the Gender, Culture, Arts and Heritage docket. Soy was born and raised in Bomet County. With those nominated into cabinet swimming in joy, it is agony for those dropped by President William Ruto, including Moses Kuria, Zakaria Njeru, Eliud Owalo, Aisha Juma, Simon Chelugoi, Babu Namwamba, Ezekiel Machogu and Florence Bore. Eyes now turn to Parliament for the vetting process as Kenyans continue to ponder on what next. Ian Keitani, K24.
The Kenyan political scene has been characterized with double standards and backstabbing. Some of those appointed from the opposition to the CS position had vowed never to work with President William Ruto on grounds of principles, some terming the Kenya Kwanza government as corrupt. President Ruto, on the other hand, promised his supporters to never allow any handshake in Kenya Kwanza, but how things change fast. We take a look at the changes over time that ushers in Odinga's fourth handshake since Moi's regime.
Waliletea fujo Moi mpaka wakapata cooperation. Wakakuja wakasumbua Kibaki mpaka wakachukua nusu mkate. Wamekuja wakazungusha Uhuru hapo mpaka wakaenda na handshake, program yetu ikapotea, BBI ikaendelea, tukazama, tukaingia kwa madeni. Sasa mimi nimewaambia, hii serikali hii, mimi nawaambia hii serikali ni ya mahasla. Hakuna nusu mkate, hakuna handshake, hakuna hiyo borojo. Hawa wananchi walimaliza kazi ya viongozi tarehe 9 mwezi wa 8, wakagawa viti yote. Viti ya viongozi ilimalizika tarehe 9 mwezi wa 8. Wale wakupata MCA walipata. Wale wakupata bunge, wale wakupata sijui governor, wale wakupata rais, imeisha. Ama kuna kiti mulibakisha? Si viti mulimaliza, muligawa ikaisha. Sasa ile kazi imebakia ni kazi ya hawa wananchi. Tujenge barabara, tujenge soko, tupange mambo ya matibabu, tupange mambo ya biashara, tupange mambo ya kilimo, tuondoe njaa. Hiyo ndio kazi imebaki. Ama namna gani jameni?
Tulikuwa tumemwambia ile mzee ya kitendawili ataleta kisirani. Tulimwambia ameletea huyu rais kisirani ati anataka handshake. Mnataka handshake? Sasa rais amekaa ngumu na mimi nikakaa ngumu zaidi. Mnataka tukae ngumu ama tukubali maneno hiyo mtu? Tukae ngumu.
Mimi Hassan Joho nikitaka kuongea, mimi I don't even dream of engaging with them. Ati huyu akitaka aje aongee sio na mimi niongee na Ruto nini? Mimi nikamtafute atanipa nini? Wilbaro. Nilipeleka Wilbaro mimi la kimtaani la kucheza nalo zamani.
Hii wameua sasa karibu zaidi ya 100. Mtu kama hawa mikono yao imejaa damu. Mikono yao imejaa damu. Hatuwezi kuongea na hawa watu. Mimi nasema no dialogue. No dialogue. No dialogue. No dialogue. No dialogue. No dialogue. Tunataka action.
Our former boss made the mistake. He brought people into government who did not believe in his vision. So wakakuja wakakoroga serikali yake. We cannot make that mistake. And I want to confirm, because some people wanasema labda president anataka handshake au Rigijidi hataki. Let me tell you, President Ruto is even more strict about this handshake nonsense than I am. He cannot accept. The handshake experiment was the worst thing to happen in the politics of this country. And there is no leader who has won an election with a comfortable margin who will be out of his mind to go and bring his opponents to come to his government.
Wapwani mpo, Kilifi na Kwale tumewasili. Sasa unaweza burudika na StarTimes DTT kila maeneo ya miji ya Kilifi na Kwale. Tumbuika na vipindi kemkem